The grand hall of the Vellery Dominion shimmered with golden light. Its tall arches stretched so high that even the tallest alien delegates felt small beneath them. Carved murals of ancient Velari victories decorated the walls, and long banners floated in the air, glowing softly with the Dominion's crest. To most who entered, it felt like stepping into the heart of galactic power. For Captain Elias Vance, a young envoy from Earth, it felt like walking into the mouth of a storm. He stood at the end of a polished marble walkway, dressed in the plain ceremonial uniform of humanity's fledgling diplomatic corps. Around him sat representatives of a dozen starfaring species, each gathered in ornate seats arranged in a vast circle. At the very center was the throne-like seat of Prince Zaltharian, heir to the Velari Dominion. The prince was tall, his silver armor glimmering under the lights, his four eyes narrowing as he studied Elias. It was the first interstellar summit humanity had ever been invited to attend. Elias had been chosen not for wealth or power, but because of his calm mind and sharp tongue. He had trained for years in diplomacy, believing words could build bridges across the stars. Yet as he stood there, he felt every eye on him, curious, doubtful, even mocking. Elias spoke with steady words, his voice echoing gently across the chamber. On behalf of Earth and the people of humanity, I thank you for allowing us to join this summit. We are young among the stars, but eager to learn, to share, and to stand as partners in peace. For a brief moment, silence held. Some alien delegates tilted their heads considering his words. Others tapped their claws, wings, or tails in quiet amusement. But then the prince himself leaned forward, his voice loud enough to fill the hall. Peace? Zaltharian repeated with a smirk. Partnership? Tell me, human, what do your kind bring that is worth notice? The Velari have ruled the stars for 10,000 years. The Karathi bend metal with their minds. The Drelk consume suns to fuel their engines. And you? The prince let his words hang. His smile widened, cruel and sharp. You come from a single dirt world, barely able to keep your skies clean. Your ships stumble through space like children learning to walk. What wisdom do you bring to this hall of the great? The hall erupted with laughter. Deep growls, high-pitched chirps and metallic clatters filled the chamber as different species joined in. Elias felt the heat rise in his chest. His instincts screamed to speak, to defend his people, to remind them of humanity's courage, their art, their ability to adapt. He could list inventions, history, sacrifices, but as he looked at the prince's smirk, Elias knew none of that would matter. The Velari saw only weakness. They saw only a species too small, too new, too fragile. Words would not change their minds. Elias's jaw tightened. His hands, hidden at his sides, curled into fists. He thought of his world, of the billions who had struggled to rise from caves and fire into cities and stars. He thought of those who had dreamed of this very day, humanity's first seat among the galactic community. And here it was, being laughed away like a child's game. Slowly, Elias lifted his head. His eyes met the prince's, calm, unshaken but heavy with meaning. Without a single word, he gave a short bow. The hall went silent for a moment, confused. Then, turning on his heel, Elias walked down the marble path, his steps echoing in the silence. No protest, no excuses, no anger, only quiet resolve. Behind him, laughter rose again, louder than before. The Velari prince leaned back in his seat, satisfied. To him, the human envoy's silence was surrender. To the gathered species, it was proof that humans were weak, too timid to defend themselves. But Elias did not falter. His stride was steady, his back straight. Each step was a promise, though none in the hall could understand it. He left without looking back, without a single word. The massive doors of the Dominion's chamber closed behind him. Outside, the spaceport city stretched across the horizon, glowing with alien lights. Towering spires of glass and crystal reached toward the sky, and ships of every shape filled the ports. Elias stood for a long time on the steps of the summit hall, breathing the cool alien air. He felt humiliation burn in his chest, but beneath it was something stronger, a quiet determination. Humanity was mocked today, but the story was not finished. He thought of the scientists back home building engines in hidden labs. He thought of the colonists carving new lives on Mars and beyond. He thought of the pilots who risked everything to test fragile ships in the void. Humanity was still young, yes, but youth was not weakness, it was potential. Elias whispered to himself, though no one was near enough to hear. They will see. One day they will see. Inside the summit hall, the laughter faded into political debate. The other delegates returned to their arguments about trade and borders, forgetting the human envoy almost immediately. Only a few, quiet and watchful, had noticed something strange in the way Elias had left. The Karathi observer, whose people could sense emotions like heat, tilted her head thoughtfully. She had felt no shame, no surrender from the human, only something steady, like a flame hidden behind stone. And in the shadows of the hall, an old Valari historian frowned. He had seen many species rise and fall, many mocked and dismissed, but something about the human silence unsettled him. It was not weakness. It was patience. As Elias boarded his small earth vessel, the crew looked to him for answers. One of the officers, young and eager, asked, "Sir, should we not defend ourselves? Should we not speak?" Elias gave a faint smile. "Sometimes words are wasted on those who will not listen. Let them laugh. Let them think we are nothing. We will not prove ourselves here with speeches. We will prove ourselves with time." The engines rumbled to life, and the small vessel rose from the alien world. As stars filled the windows, Elias looked out at the galaxy, so vast, so full of doubt. He bowed his head once more, not in defeat, but in silent promise. Humanity's time would come. The ship carrying Captain Elias Vance back to Earth cut through the stars like a quiet shadow. Inside, the crew was silent. They had all seen the way the Valari prince mocked humanity. They had heard the laughter of the great alien powers, and though they tried to hide it, the sting of humiliation was heavy in their eyes. Elias, however, sat calmly in his chair, staring out the viewport at the endless void. To him, silence had always been a weapon sharper than words. He had not defended himself at the summit because he knew it would change nothing. The Valari believed they ruled the stars. Nothing he could say would alter their arrogance. But in his heart he carried a fire that no laughter could extinguish. When the ship touched down on Earth, news of the summit traveled faster than light. Across the world, people were divided. Some felt ashamed. They whispered that humanity should have never stepped into galactic politics so soon. Others were angry, demanding that they should have spoken, should have shouted their worth. But Elias stood before the leaders of Earth with the same calm he had shown in the summit hall. "We do not need to prove ourselves with words," he said. "Let them laugh. Let them underestimate us. The galaxy does not know us yet, but we will show them, not today, not tomorrow, but in time. Every moment we are mocked is fuel for what we will become." His words spread across the world. Slowly, the shame and anger transformed into determination. The people of Earth began to work not for applause, but for progress. The quiet years had begun. The hidden work. For the next 27 years, humanity turned inward. While the other galactic powers boasted of their fleets and fought over borders, Earth poured its energy into building, researching, and growing. Scientists on Luna worked day and night on new engines that could carry ships faster and further than ever before. On Mars, colonies expanded beneath glass domes, their red deserts slowly being tamed with green fields of experimental crops. On Titan, engineers studied alien materials and designed alloys that even Valari weapons would struggle to pierce. Elias Vance did not return to the stage of politics. Instead, he vanished from the public eye, moving quietly between secret research stations, shipyards hidden on the far edge of the solar system, and training academies where the next generation of explorers and pilots were raised. His presence was steady, but never loud. He never shouted orders. He never sought glory. He simply guided, suggested, and reminded people of their purpose. Every time someone doubted, every time someone asked if the galaxy would ever respect them, Elias gave the same answer. "They will see. One day they will see." Whispers in the stars. The galaxy, meanwhile, moved on. The Valari Dominion grew prouder. The Karathi refined their arts, and the Drelk consumed new stars for power. Humanity was rarely spoken of except as a joke told in passing. "Ah, yes, the humans," some aliens would laugh. "The dirt farmers. The ones who walk out of halls because they cannot argue." But not everyone was blind. A few traders who traveled to the Sol system for rare goods returned with strange reports. They spoke of shipyards larger than they had expected, of fleets being tested in silence, of humans who asked many questions but gave few answers. The Volari dismissed these as lies. The humans are too small, too weak. They could never build fleets in secret, Prince, now King Zeltharion, said with arrogance. But the whispers grew. And with every rumor, Elias Vance smiled quietly, knowing the galaxy's ignorance was humanity's shield. The generations who believed 27 years is a long time in a single life, but only the beginning for a species. Children who had once watched the news of the summit grew into adults under the shadow of that mockery. To them, the story of Elias Vance's silence was not shame. It was a lesson. In schools, children were told the tale of the envoy who had walked away without anger, holding his words for a future moment. To them, silence became strength. They learned that patience could be sharper than pride. In academies, cadets trained not to boast of their strength but to master discipline. Fleets of new warships were built, their hulls painted black to vanish against the void. Crews drilled in silence, moving like parts of a single machine. And across the colonies, from the greenhouses of Mars to the icy outposts of Europa, people worked not for applause, but for the vision of a day when humanity would stand tall without speaking a word. Elias, in the shadows, Elias grew older, but his resolve never wavered. His hair turned silver, his face lined with age, but his eyes remained sharp and clear. He walked the halls of secret stations, watching young officers plan battles they had never yet fought. He stood in laboratories listening as scientists explained engines that bent space in ways once thought impossible. He never claimed credit, never asked for statues or honors. He was content to remain a shadow, guiding and watching. At night, when he sat alone, he often thought of the summit hall, of the prince's mocking words and the laughter that had followed. The memory burned, but it no longer pained him. Instead, it reminded him of the promise he had made in silence. They will see, he whispered to himself, again and again, the calm before the storm. As the 27th year approached, the galaxy began to change. Distant stars flickered and died. Trade ships vanished in dark regions of space. Rumors spread of an old enemy, the voidborn swarm, stirring in forgotten corners of the universe. At first, the great powers ignored the warnings. They were too busy mocking each other, too certain of their own strength. But as colonies fell and fleets vanished, fear began to spread. The Volari Dominion called for unity. The Karathi debated endlessly. The Drelk prepared for war. And still, humanity remained quiet. On Earth, in the deep chambers of the hidden fleet command, Elias Vance stood before a massive window, watching as rows of ships rose from their docks. They gleamed with new armor, their engines glowing softly. The work of decades was ready. Elias said nothing. His silence was the same as it had been 27 years ago. But this time the silence was not mockery, it was power. Humanity was ready. The stars had always seemed quiet and peaceful to the people of Earth. But in the far reaches of space, far beyond the settled colonies, a darkness was stirring. The voidborn swarm, an ancient, relentless species, was moving through uncharted systems, leaving nothing but destruction in its wake. Entire star systems vanished in silence, their suns dimming as the swarm consumed planets and fleets alike. The news reached the galaxy slowly at first. Scouts who survived encounters returned with fragments of reports. Massive creatures that moved faster than any ship. Energy fields that destroyed engines instantly, and endless numbers that seemed impossible to count. The great powers of the galaxy reacted differently. The Volari Dominion mobilized fleets, shining in their pride and skill, yet failing to stop the swarm. The Karathi tried to use their mental abilities to foresee the swarm's movements, but they found nothing. The Drelk, who had devoured suns for power, were driven back by sheer force. The galaxy realized, too late, that it faced an enemy unlike any before. The Volari and panicking Zeltharion paced in the central hall of the Volari command station. His silver armor no longer gleamed with arrogance. It reflected worry. Reports of lost colonies had grown from whispers to undeniable fact. We underestimated them, he admitted to his council, his 4 eyes scanning the room. We thought the voidborn were distant myths. Now they consume our worlds like children picking flowers. Advisors offered solutions, each one more desperate than the last. Reinforcements from the Karathi? Already destroyed. Alliances with the Drelk? Refused. Even their most advanced ships were being torn apart. The king clenched his hands. He remembered the human envoy, Captain Elias Vance, who had walked away decades ago. He remembered the laughter, the mockery, the so-called weakness. Perhaps, he thought, a cold shiver running down his spine. Perhaps he had been wrong to ignore them. A call across the stars, the Volari sent messages to every known species in the galaxy. Embassies buzzed with urgency. Requests for help went out, promising trade, alliances, and technology in exchange for aid. Yet few responded. Some had fallen to the swarm already. Others had decided it was safer to hide and wait, but humanity, so long overlooked, received the message quietly. For decades, humans had built fleets, trained pilots, perfected tactics, and engineered weapons beyond the imagination of even the most advanced alien civilizations. And now, the time had come to use all they had learned. At the fleet command, deep in Earth's orbit, Elias Vance stood before the gathered officers. His face, lined with age but unyielding, carried the same calm determination he had shown 27 years ago. "The galaxy believes we are weak," he said. "They believe our silence means surrender. But we have been ready all along. We will act, not because they ask us to, but because we must protect the future of humanity and the galaxy." The room erupted with quiet energy. The fleet, long hidden from the eyes of other species, began to prepare for departure. Every ship, every crew, every weapon was ready. Preparation and strategy. Elias knew the voidborn swarm could not be defeated by raw power alone. The creatures were too numerous, too fast, and too unpredictable. Humanity would need clever tactics, precise coordination, and the courage to face an enemy that did not fear death. Training sessions ran for weeks. Pilots practiced maneuvers through simulated swarms that filled entire hollow chambers. Engineers adjusted engines and shields, ensuring every ship could move faster than thought possible. Scientists calculated energy pulses that could disrupt the swarm's movement, based on patterns the creatures followed without realizing it. Every member of the fleet knew the stakes, yet morale was high. Humans did not dwell on fear. They relied on preparation, intelligence, and teamwork. In a quiet, unshakable way, they were ready. Elias walked through the docks, inspecting every ship. Each one gleamed under the artificial lights, black hulls designed to blend with space, engines humming with untapped power. He nodded silently to the crew members, who looked back at him with respect. No words were needed. They had trained under him for decades. They understood his meaning. The first encounter. The fleet departed in silence, slipping through hyperspace to meet the threat head-on. Human ships moved like shadows, striking with precision. As the first waves of the voidborn emerged, humanity's hidden power became clear. Fighters darted between enormous creatures, drawing their attention, while larger ships delivered calculated attacks. Energy pulses disrupted the swarm's formation, breaking the rhythm that had made them so unstoppable. Fleet commanders relayed orders instantly, moving as one organism rather than separate vessels. Elias watched from the command bridge, calm but focused. Every move had been planned, yet he knew adaptability was key. The swarm did not behave like any enemy they had studied. Every second brought surprises, and yet human discipline and ingenuity kept the fleet alive. Systems that other species had considered obsolete worked flawlessly. Tactics that seemed impossible were executed with near perfection. The Galaxy Watch's news of humanity's fleet began to spread across the galaxy. The Volari Dominion, previously confident in their superiority, watched in disbelief. Their fleets had failed, yet these humans, once mocked as weak, were holding the line. The Karathi, observing through psychic links, felt a mixture of awe and fear. Even the Drelk, far away, paused their energy consumption to study the unexpected strategy. In the silence of space, humans moved like a force unseen. They did not shout, they did not boast, they acted. And every victory, every calculated strike, spoke louder than words ever could. The galaxy began to realize something important. Humanity had been underestimated for decades, and in that underestimation lay their greatest strength, Elias's silent leadership. Throughout the battle, Elias Vance remained calm. He did not cheer for victories. He did not curse failures. He watched, calculated, and guided. Every decision he made was precise. His voice carried authority, yet his words were few. You see them, you adapt. You see an opening, you strike. Always move together, always think ahead, he instructed. The officers obeyed without hesitation. They trusted him because for 27 years he had prepared them for this moment. Every drill, every long night, every quiet lesson had been a step toward this confrontation. Turning the tide days past. The swarm seemed endless. Every victory was met with new waves, testing humanity's endurance. Yet slowly they turned the tide. Planets were protected, colonies saved, and enemy creatures destroyed. Human ships moved with precision no other fleet had achieved. The galaxy began to whisper. Perhaps these humans were different. The Volari king, once so proud, now watched in stunned silence. The envoy who had once bowed and walked away without a word, now commanded a fleet that could protect star systems from annihilation. His arrogance had been his own undoing, and yet Elias said nothing. He did not gloat. He understood the battle was not yet over. Words were unnecessary. The actions of humanity were louder than anything spoken, a silent promise. As the battle raged on, Elias remembered the first summit hall so many years ago. He remembered the laughter, the mockery, the doubts of the galaxy, and he remembered the promise he had made in silence, that one day humanity would be seen for what it truly was. Now that day was here. The fleet continued to fight with patience, courage, and precision. The galaxy began to realize that humans were not only capable, they were remarkable. Not because they shouted, not because they demanded recognition, but because they had prepared, endured, and acted when the time came. And in the quiet command room of the hidden fleet, Elias Vance smiled. "They will see," he whispered. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. From the outer edges of human-controlled space, fleets of black-hulled warships slipped through hyperspace like shadows. No flags waved, no trumpets announced their arrival. They were human ships, sleek, precise, and silent, moving with purpose. At the forefront of the fleet was Captain Elias Vance, older now, his silver hair catching the dim lights of the command bridge, his eyes calm and determined. For decades, humanity had prepared in silence. Now they were returning to the galaxy, not to boast, not to beg for recognition, but to act. The approach as the fleet moved closer to the contested systems, the Volari Dominion watched from orbit. King Zaltharian, once arrogant, now trembled with uncertainty. Reports of lost colonies, destroyed fleets, and unexpected resistance had already shaken him. But this was beyond imagination. "Impossible," he whispered, staring at the holographic display of approaching ships. They said humans were weak. They said they could not survive among the stars. The humans were not weak, not timid, not inexperienced. Every ship was designed for efficiency. Every crew trained to anticipate and react with near-perfect coordination. The galaxy had underestimated them for decades, and that mistake was about to be revealed. Silent Power Elias did not give speeches. He did not call for recognition. He did not remind anyone of the mockery from 27 years ago. He simply moved forward, allowing the fleet to act with precision and strength. Every engagement with the voidborn swarm was carefully calculated. Human pilots darted between the massive creatures, drawing their attention while larger ships delivered devastating strikes. Energy pulses disrupted the swarm's coordination, and carefully timed attacks shattered their advance. It was not raw power that won the day. It was intelligence, discipline, and patience. Every move was precise. Every reaction was measured. The Volari watch in awe King Zaltharian observed from his throne room, along with the highest council members of the Volari Dominion. The humans' fleet moved with a grace and precision that the Volari had never seen. Every attack, every maneuver was coordinated perfectly. No chaos, no wasted energy, no hesitation. The king could not hide his astonishment. He remembered the human envoy, the one who had bowed and walked away in silence, and he realized for the first time that he had been wrong. The envoy had not been weak. He had been preparing. Even the seasoned generals of the Volari were forced to admit it. Humans had become a force unlike any other in the galaxy. The first major battle, the fleets finally encountered a massive swarm near the star system of Orin Prime. Thousands of voidborn ships and creatures emerged, dark and menacing, spreading across the space like a living shadow. The human fleet responded with quiet precision. Fighters darted through the swarm, drawing fire while larger ships fired precise energy pulses. Shields flared and then dimmed. Engines burned and the voidborn creatures fell one by one, disrupted by the humans' careful tactics. The galaxy had never seen such coordination. Not one human ship faltered. Not one pilot hesitated. They moved as one, a single living organism made of ships, crew, and minds working together. Elias remained at the command bridge, silent and composed. Every decision had been planned, every contingency prepared. Yet he remained adaptable, adjusting strategies in real time as the swarm shifted and changed. A galaxy realizes the truth. Across distant colonies, the news spread quickly. Humans were not weak. Humans were not to be mocked. The species that had been laughed at, ridiculed, and underestimated for decades had returned, not with words, but with undeniable action. Even the Karathi, who could read emotions and intentions, watched with awe. Humans did not panic. They did not shout. They did not attempt to dominate or boast. They simply acted with intelligence, patience, and courage. Every victory, every planet saved, every swarm destroyed became a testament to what humans were capable of. Humanity's silence had never been weakness. It had been strength waiting for the right moment. Elias's strategy. Elias knew that the swarm could not be destroyed by sheer force alone. It required coordination, timing, and strategy. The humans' fleet operated with precision beyond what any other species could achieve. He organized attacks into waves, always keeping the fleet moving, always striking at weak points in the swarm. He anticipated their movement, calculated their patterns, and exploited them. Even the most experienced alien commanders could not predict the humans' next move. "They move as one," a Volari general muttered to a colleague. "They are flawless." Elias did not hear this. He did not need recognition. His only concern was victory, the protection of humanity and the galaxy, and the fulfillment of a promise made in silence decades ago. The turning point after days of engagement, the swarm began to falter. Human tactics had not only defended planets, but had also destroyed the leadership of the creatures, breaking the swarm's coordination. Fleets that were previously unstoppable now struggled to respond, and still the humans did not celebrate. They did not shout their victory. They continued to move forward silently, efficiently, relentlessly. Every ship, every crew member, acted with the same quiet determination that had guided humanity for decades. The galaxy could only watch in awe. The species once mocked as weak had become a force that could not be ignored. The quiet return. After the battle, the fleet entered orbit around Orion Prime, the first major victory for humanity. The survivors of the local colonies stared at the human ships in wonder. Some wept with relief, some bowed in gratitude. Others could barely comprehend what they had just witnessed. Elias Vance did not give speeches. He did not ask for thanks. He remained on the command bridge observing his fleet, ensuring that every ship was ready for the next challenge. The human's power spoke louder than words ever could. King Zaltharian, watching from his distant station, felt a mixture of fear and awe. He had once mocked this human, laughed at his silence, and believed humanity was weak. Now he realized the truth. Humans had been preparing for this moment all along. Their silence had been a warning, a promise, and now a demonstration of undeniable strength. A silent lesson. In the aftermath of the battle, the galaxy began to change. Aliens who had once considered humans weak now approached with respect. Some sought alliances. Some observed quietly, learning. Others began to reconsider their own arrogance. But Elias Vance remained silent. He had no desire for recognition or praise. Words were unnecessary. Actions had spoken for decades, and now they had spoken louder than any speech could. He walked through the corridors of the flagship, passing young pilots who had been trained to fight with precision and courage. He nodded to them, silently acknowledging their skill, their bravery, and their discipline. They understood. They had learned from him without needing to hear a single boast. And as the stars stretched endlessly beyond the viewports, Elias whispered to himself, "They will see, and they will understand." The promise of humanity. The fleet had returned not with glory, but with strength. Humanity's silent preparation had become a force the galaxy could not ignore. The species that had once been mocked, ridiculed, and underestimated had now proven their worth, not with words, but with actions that reshaped the future of the galaxy. Elias Vance, older, wiser, and still silent, stood at the command bridge, watching as humanity's ships moved through space. The promise made in silence decades ago had been kept. Humanity had returned to the galaxy, Not to beg for recognition, not to boast, but to act, to protect, and to inspire. The galaxy would never underestimate humans again. And for Elias, that was enough. The galaxy was quiet now, but not peaceful. The voidborn swarm had been pushed back, its shadow lifted from the stars, yet the echoes of battle remained. Systems that had once trembled in fear were now cautious, watching the human fleet move steadily from one sector to another. At the center of it all stood Captain Elias Vance, older and wiser, yet still resolute. His silver hair framed a face marked by years of responsibility, but his eyes held the same calm determination he had shown decades ago. Humanity had returned not with speeches or proclamations, but with quiet, undeniable strength. A galactic summit, the Volari Dominion, humbled by recent events, called for a new summit. Not for mockery, not for pride, but for recognition and cooperation. Representatives from the Karathi, the Drelk, and other species attended, unsure of what to expect. All eyes were drawn to the human delegation, which had arrived silently and confidently. At the head of the human fleet, Elias stepped onto the summit platform. No banners were raised. No speeches were made. He did not demand honor or recognition. He simply stood, a figure of quiet authority. King Zaltharian approached, his silver armor reflecting the ambient light. The arrogance that had once defined him was gone. Now there was only respect and a hint of shame. "You have changed the galaxy," Zaltharian said quietly. "Humans, I see now that we were wrong to mock you." Elias gave no reply. He did not need to. His presence alone, supported by the fleets and colonies of humanity, spoke volumes. The power of silence, as the summit proceeded, leaders from across the galaxy whispered among themselves. They debated treaties, defense strategies, and alliances. But no words could overshadow the quiet lesson humanity had delivered. Actions matter more than words. Elias walked among the representatives, observing their reactions. Some stared in awe, some bowed in respect, others still struggled to understand how a species so long dismissed could rise to such heights. But all of them knew one thing: humanity's power was real, deliberate, and undeniable. A young Karathi diplomat finally asked, How did they do it? How did humanity grow so strong while we all laughed?" The answer was simple, though unspoken. Decades of patience, silent preparation, and unwavering determination. Humanity had worked quietly, building strength without seeking attention. Their silence had been louder than any insult or speech, the return of old shadows. Even as the summit continued, remnants of the voidborn swarm lingered in uncharted space. Humanity's fleet did not relax. They patrolled, studied, and prepared for any new threat. The galaxy watched, learning from humans' discipline and coordination. Elias Vance supervised operations from the flagship's bridge, calm and vigilant. Every move, every order, every decision reinforced the lesson he had carried since the first summit. Power earned through preparation and patience is more enduring than power shouted from pride. For the first time in decades, King Zaltharian truly understood. The envoy he had mocked was not weak. The human species he had underestimated was a force of intelligence, discipline, and courage. And the silence that had once seemed like surrender was, in truth, the loudest statement of all. Humanity's influence, news of humanity's victories, spread across the galaxy. Other species began to emulate their strategies: coordinated fleets, disciplined crews, careful planning, and patience over arrogance. Humans were no longer the subject of mockery. They were teachers, leaders, and examples of what could be achieved when determination met preparation. Elias walked among young officers, observing their confidence, their skill, and their calm in the face of danger. He remembered the generations who had grown up hearing of his silence and of the human way. They now embodied the same principles: discipline, patience, and quiet resolve. They have learned well, Elias thought. The galaxy will see that humanity is not only strong, it is wise. The poetic justice. The final day of the summit arrived. Delegates gathered to formalize new alliances and treaties. Humanity had no demands. They asked for no special privileges. They did not boast about victories or flaunt their strength. Their presence alone commanded respect. King Zaltharian approached Elias once more. I cannot undo the past," he admitted. but I can honor the future. Humans, your patience, skill, and courage have changed everything. I hope that one day the galaxy will judge all of us by our actions, not our words." Elias nodded slightly, acknowledging the truth without a word. His fleet, disciplined and silent, had delivered the message more clearly than any speech could have. The galaxy had learned that actions, patience, and determination are stronger than mockery, arrogance, or words alone. A new era with the summit concluded. Humanity's fleet returned to the outer colonies, continuing to protect systems and train new generations. The galaxy had entered a new era, one in which humans were respected not for their past weaknesses, but for their current strength and their quiet, unwavering resolve. Colonies once mocked were now admired. Human innovations were sought after by other species, and everywhere Elias went, people remembered the story of the envoy who had once walked out of a summit without a word. That story had become legend, inspiring not just humans but species across the galaxy. The silent exit remembered Elias often reflected on that first summit, 27 years ago. He remembered the laughter, the mockery, and the disbelief. He remembered the silence that had puzzled the Volari and other delegates. And now he saw the full power of that moment. The galaxy had learned a lesson. Words can be hollow, pride can blind, and arrogance can misjudge true strength. But patience, preparation, and quiet determination cannot be ignored. They speak louder than any insult, louder than any speech, louder than the mocking of the past. Elias walked on the observation deck of his flagship, watching stars stretch into the distance. The human fleet patrolled silently, disciplined and ready, and for the first time he felt complete. Humanity had not only survived, they had proven themselves in a way that would be remembered for generations. "They will always see," he whispered, "the legacy of humanity." Decades later, historians would write of the human rise in the galaxy. Stories of mockery and silence became lessons taught to young officers in academies across multiple species. They learned that strength is not measured by words but by action, that patience can overcome arrogance. That silence, when guided by resolve, is louder than any roar. The envoy who had once been laughed at, Captain Elias Vance, became a symbol. Not because he demanded recognition, but because his actions had spoken for humanity when the galaxy doubted them most. Humanity had returned to the stars, not to boast, not to conquer, but to act with intelligence, courage, and discipline. And in doing so, they reshaped the galaxy forever. The final moment Elias stood alone on the bridge as the fleet moved through the stars, the light of distant suns reflecting off black hulls. He had no need for applause, no need for words of praise. Humanity's actions had delivered their message. The galaxy had learned what humans could achieve when underestimated, what they could accomplish when patient, and what they could become when silent resolve guided them. The universe had finally heard the loudest words Elias had ever spoken, without a sound. "They will remember," he said softly, a smile touching his lips. "They will never forget." And with that, humanity's silent strength continued to move forward, steady, deliberate, and unstoppable.